Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the next ReGen Ag Chat. My name is Genever, and Nick Renison will introduce himself shortly. Tonight, we're joined by Anna de la Vega, who runs Urban Worm, and the title is called Planning the New Worm Order, which will come on. Well, there's loads to talk about in terms of worms. Nick and I went to a Nicole Masters course in November and became slightly obsessed. So forgive me, I am slightly obsessive about worms currently. So, Nick, what have you been up to recently?
I have been up to more tree planting, more hedge planting, more taking guards off hedges. The other day I saw a hedge actually that had been laid with the spiral still on it, which infuriated me. I've been sorting out just loads of paperwork and boring stuff. But I have been to a few meetings with Nature Friendly Farming around the uplands and schemes and payments. And it's been on Twitter a lot just over the weekend. But I think there is going to be a bit of a kind of falling off a cliff in the uplands, and going to meetings, it's quite apparent the pickle that we're going to get in. It just seems environmentalists on one side, farmers on the other, and just, it's Nigel, can you hear him? Nigel. Yeah, it's going to be a collision. But I've been doing quite a lot of carbon calling preparation. Exciting lineup. People. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to mute myself while I sort this dog out, Liz. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I've been, what have I been doing? We've been TB testing at home, so that's all clear, so that's good. And I've started lambing. So we officially started today, but we had a few yesterday as well. So we are in that phase at the beginning of lambing where he's trying to remember where you put everything about a year ago. So we're just trying to find stuff at the moment. So that's that. And then we're just in the process of trying to sort out a new countryside stewardship scheme. So hoping to go into a higher level one, but we shall see. So deadline.
So can I just say one thing? On the 29th of March, I mentioned it on the last chat, we are having a meeting here with David Cornforth and Fergus Henderson. So if anyone's around here, they're coming up on a bit of a tour, and we're doing it with the Farmer Network and Pasture for Life. So I'll have it on social media in a bit, but it should be good.
And just to confirm your location, if people aren't familiar.
Penrith, half an hour from Penrith. Yeah.
Okay. So as ever, just before we start, if you've got any questions or queries as we go through, just type them into the Q&A bit at the bottom, and we'll deal with them as we go through. And I still have to say, yeah, just to confirm, carbon calling, we're having two sites. The original site in Cumbria is the 9th, 10th of September, which is a Saturday, Sunday. The exciting news is we're also doing one at Farm Ed down in Oxfordshire, and that's on the 6th and 7th of September. And the headline speaker will be Jamie Alexander at both. And then, as Nick says, there'll be other people that are at both sites, and then we'll also have different speakers at each site too. Anyway, so just dates for your diary. We've done a second site, just we were very conscious that people are travelling quite a distance. So won't be quite like Cumbria, but it'll be very similar. So thank you very much for Farm Ed, and also working alongside Pasture for Life at that one. Right, at that point, we will get started and have a chat with Anna. So Anna, is it possible just to give a bit of a background to yourself? And
yes.
How did you get to love worms so much?
Okay, well, I actually started out as a photojournalist. I was very interested in intentional communities and people living off grid, but then actually wrote my thesis on truth and discovered that probably that wasn't the best career to go down if I wanted to have any integrity. So actually, but before that, I went to, before I decided to not go into journalism, I actually went to do an internship in Nepal with the Kathmandu Post. And I didn't enjoy that, so I left to go and volunteer with a charity called Practical Action that was founded by a guy called Ernest Fritz Schumacher, who wrote Small is Beautiful, Economics of the People Mattered. And that really inspired me and changed my life. And it's about appropriate tech. I was advocating for low tech appropriate technology. He termed it appropriate technology to alleviate people from poverty, as opposed to big tech when everything was going in that direction. So when I came back to the UK, I wanted to retrain. So I went and studied for an MA in human security and environmental change, but I specialised in food. I was living in the city at the time, hence the Urban Worm, and I specialised in urban agriculture. And I learned about the state of the soil and the fact that we're going to be living in cities and how do we feed ourselves in cities. So I decided to set up the Urban Worm. I learned through my studies, I learned about vermiculture. So, and then when I graduated, I won an award, Women in Social and Environmental Enterprise. So that was just the start of grants. And then I've been dependent on grants for maybe like 8 years. I'm not now, but I was very grant dependent because obviously not many people in the UK knew about worm farming. And 10 years later, here I am. So, and I'm not in the city anymore. I managed to escape the city, but I still work with communities, with urban communities, but I work with farmers now as well, promoting worm farming.
Excellent.
So that's a rundown.
And I suppose it's, I suppose if we go back a couple of, so for you, in terms of you make a worm farm in anything, can't you?
Yes.
So I the smallest you've made.
Yeah, so a 10-litre worm farm actually started out, I've designed parts to convert wheelie bins into worm farms. So that was my first product living in the city. People don't have access to outdoor space, and composting in the city as well can be a challenge if people don't know how to compost properly. You're just creating a methane site emitting toxic greenhouse gases. And yeah, I wanted to offer something that was low tech and low cost for people, but you can worm farm on a really small scale indoors. So the smallest I make and sell is a 10-litre worm farm. So you can do it on a really small scale and you can keep it in your cupboard. You don't need a garden to make the earth. So really simple, low tech. And I have my parts made from recycled plastic at a local factory in Leicester. I'm based in Nottinghamshire. And I use old for sale signs for drainage boards. So I upcycle those as well, saved them from landfill because they can't recycle the Corex. So really low tech. Anything can be a worm farm, even a plastic bag. I've seen plastic bags hanging from trees in India is a worm farm. As long as there's oxygen and drainage, you can keep worms.
This is a strange question. How do you know it's ready? Like, is there such a thing as ready? Is it a constant journey? It looks like,
dark brown, about 70% cocoa chocolate. So that's what you're going for. And it looks like the earth. It's very fine. It just looks like very good quality soil and smells very sweet, like soil.
Okay. And then that's an opportunity to either spread it as that, or you can do extracts from it as well.
Yes. So yeah, a compost tea. A tablespoon will feed a plant for 3 months. It's very nutrient dense. It contains all 14 nutrients that plants need, and obviously all the beneficial microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, your nematodes. So it has everything that we need. It has excellent water retention capacity as well. So it's great for hanging baskets and vertical gardens that often dry out, and a little goes a long way. So it's really special stuff.
And we were talking earlier, which is why is the UK so behind in using it? Or
yes, I don't know. I'm asked this question a lot. I think maybe a theory. Obviously, the UK is the birthplace of synthetic fertilizers at the Rothamsted Institute. John Laws. So I don't know if you know the little story. So the UK government funded Chile to go to war. It was the War of the Pacific, and that was over guano poo. I think it was like 1887, around that time. It was for 5 years. Yeah, you might want to check that. So yeah, that's when they started producing, obviously, but they needed the nitrates. So I think that's probably why we've got there's big industry in the UK. And then obviously that started to run out, and then it was Fritz Haber that discovered a way to synthesize nitrates. And it's the same way to make bombs as it is to make fertilizer. Hence my motto is worms and peace. So yeah, I think it's potentially something to do with that. I don't know. People say, you know, maybe it's the climate, but you know, they're worm farming in upstate New York in Rochester, and it's really cold there. So they're doing it there. That's one of the biggest worm farms in the world. Worm Power, that's called. So yeah, I went to, oh yeah, I forgot to say, actually, I'm a Winston Churchill fellow. So I was funded to go to America and Cuba in 2016 to research vermiculture. So I visited prisons, universities, schools, industrial worm farms, to see how they're doing on different scales. And I was interested in going to Cuba because of with the breakdown of the Soviet Union, the average Cuban lost £20 and they lost 80% of their imports and exports practically overnight. And they're actually using twice the amount of synthetic fertilizer per hectare as the US, because obviously their sugar production was pretty huge. And they were getting five times the market price for their sugar. So they were growing lots of sugar, and when the collapse happened, they weren't growing enough food. But luckily somebody introduced vermiculture into the country 2 years before the collapse, and 1 ton of worm manure was replacing the need for 8 tons of cow manure. So that really saved them. But sadly, the story is when I went back, they've actually reverted and people aren't using vermiculture anymore. They're back to using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. Not in the city, but they are in the countryside. So this story that we're told isn't necessarily reality.
But they do have the power to save us all, basically.
Yes, they do.
And massively reduce imports going onto farm.
100%. Yeah. Any organic waste, the worms will process. Human waste, obviously agricultural waste. And as I was talking to you about earlier, they can clean dog waste as well. Not that I advise to use that on edibles, but it can be used on ornamental plants. So whatever passes through their body becomes clean.
Could you talk a little, before we get onto the farming stuff, could you talk about the when we talked earlier, it was the shopping centres and the military. So in those situations, could you just talk through, say, a big shopping centre? How the process works? Yeah,
so at MacArthur Glen Designer Shopping Outlet Centre in Birmingham in Cannock, they have 6 1,100 litre wheelie bin worm farms. So I've adapted, I adapt them on any scale. And Wagamamas and Slim Chickens, I think it's called, they're using the worm farms to manage the kitchen waste. And then the company Urban Planters that manages the grounds, then they're using that on the grounds. Okay. And the military, so I've got 3 military sites. We've got Stanford Hall Military Hospital in Loughborough, Coningsby, RAF Coningsby, that's in Lincoln, and RAF Waddington. So they're using these for their canteen waste, and then they're using the compost on the grounds as well.
And do you have to, so for that, do you have to add some brown material in? Because I'm guessing it's all white.
So we use cardboard. So I use a lot of cardboard. And I go and check them. So my job is to maintain these. So I go every month, check the worms are okay, check the balance of materials, and see if they're doing okay.
And then how long does it take? So you put the waste in.
Yeah. So I mean, it's amazing the amount that the worms are reducing the quantity. So they can reduce the quantity up to 90%. So we've been feeding these bins for a year now, and there's like this much in the bottom. It's amazing. So for waste management, it's just perfect, particularly for very densely populated environments. And it doesn't smell at all. So if your worm farm is starting to smell, it's gone wrong. It's gone anaerobic, and we don't want that.
And you put some the worms in there to begin with?
Yes.
And then
start off with the best starter material is horse manure. Obviously, if the horses have been wormed, you want to leave it for 28 days. Otherwise, the worming medication will kill the worm. So yeah, you want to leave it about a month. if it's fresh, just to be sure. But that's a really good starter material because it's obviously food for them as well. It's full of microbes. So it's a really good Kickstarter. I mean, you can use shredded paper as bedding, obviously coconut core, compost, but the best is horse manure if you can get hold of that. But they obviously will eat any waste. Organic, as long as if it's been alive and passed through something that's been alive, the worms will eat it.
And then they start to breed, do they?
So they can double their population every 60 days. So they're pretty prolific breeders because they're hermaphrodites, but they need to mate with another worm to reproduce. And they lay little cocoons, little gold cocoons. And when they first lay them, they're pale yellow. And when they're about to hatch, after about a month, they go dark orange. And you know that a worm is an adult by the band. That's the saddle, or we call it the clitellum. So that's when it sexually can reproduce. So that's after 60 days.
So they take a month to develop from the cocoon to the laying to the little worm, and then 6 days from that to actually being able to breed again.
An adult.
And then how long? How long do they live?
Well, they say two to 10 years, but actually longer in captivity. Well, I've had a few issues with vegans. Vegans not all vegans like what I do and say I keep worms in captivity, but they do actually live longer in a worm farm than they do in nature.
These are generally tiger worms.
Yes,
that you're using. Yes.
So tiger worms or dendrobina worms as well. It's good to have a mix of both, but in the UK we usually use tigers or dendras. Dendras are a bit bigger. They're great for fishing.
Different world, Liz.
It's a different one because I just associate.
And they're very high in protein, 70% protein. So it's also another avenue for producing animal feed as well.
But not human food.
Not human food. No, well, I'm sure it's absolutely fine. I think in China they make burgers. Earthworm burgers are a delicacy. I've never tried it myself, but
because I just associate it, in the back of the Farmer's Guardian, there was always an advert for a worm farm. Do you want to get into worm farming? And you just always associated it with a guessing for fishing to produce actual worms to then sell to fisher people. But obviously now it's now about waste, isn't it? Processing waste is a very useful thing.
And I think we do need people to be producing, to be breeding. So I don't actually breed worms. I want to keep my worms to make vermicompost. It's a very different process to breed to breed worms. And there's definitely going to be a gap because it's really growing. I'm seeing this with my own business, and there's going to be a deficit in worms. So another opportunity for people to look into.
So how many worm farmers are they in this country? The worm farmers, or
yes, so we've got last time I haven't done much research recently, but when I was starting out there was like, I don't know, 3 or 4. So not many people that are actually producing a lot of worms to sell, but there's actually, I've made a contact with a farmer in Wales. He's a duck farmer and he's using vermiculture to produce vermicast to sell. I've been contacted by a farmer in Ireland near Cork, and he's set up a vermiculture operation as well. So I'm sure there are people doing it on small scales on farms, but we're not quite there yet. And I was talking about you were saying about an advert about worm farming. There was about 15 years ago, there was a big push, like lots of get rich quick schemes people were looking into with the worms. And it's animal husbandry at the end of the day, and if people are going to invest a lot of money in this, it's good to start small, because they're very expensive. Worms are I think they've gone up now, £30 a kilo. So when you're it's a big investment.
There's a question actually relating to that. So Chris, can you collect them? So would they be somewhere on a farm already?
So so what you can do, a good way to find surface dwelling worms, because these are epigeic worms. We don't use deep burrowing worms, typical garden worms in vermiculture, because they burrow down, and we want the ones that live on the top. They thrive in rotting waste. But if you've got a compost manure pile, they'll migrate to there. But also, if you put damp cardboard on the floor, on the grass, you'll find them under there as well. Leave it for a couple of weeks, and they love cardboard. They absolutely love cardboard. I think it's the glue that keeps it together. Like, it's very starchy, but you'll find worms mating in the grooves of cardboard.
Wow.
Who knew?
Just anyway, it's blowing my mind and everybody else's question. So with a couple more in terms of just quick one, which is, can they break down meat waste? I guess
Yeah.
And knowing who's asking the question, I'm guessing out of abattoir type meat waste.
Yeah.
Rather than
So
cooked.
actually in the Philippines, I had some research. I'm good at getting research to travel. I went to the Philippines. When was that? Like 2018. And I traveled with a vermiculture consultant, and he's working with abattoirs, and the worms are breaking down animal waste.
So you just put, if you just, you'd have like cardboard, bones, bits of odds and ends of animal.
Yeah.
Is it legal?
What, to break down animal waste with? I don't know. I haven't really looked into that. But you can compost. You can, you can hot compost animals. Can't you? Is that it's not legal? Is that not legal?
No.
It can be done. It can be done.
In terms, from a farm animal perspective, have to be disposed of as in an appropriate thing.
Yeah, in appropriate manner. But yeah, it can. And obviously, the worms will eat us one day, won't they? So,
I mean, that's the danger, because we've come so sanitized. And so when you think about food waste, and it's a different subject, but we should be heating that up for properly for animals, maybe, shouldn't we? But anyway, it's because
this is a cool composting process. So rather than a thermophilic, it's a mesophilic process. And obviously, if you cut a worm in two, it won't become two worms. This is just a lie. I'm not sure who started that one. But yeah, it's not true. But if they get the tail snipped off, they can regenerate and they can grow back. But if it gets cut off, if they get cut in two close to the saddle, they will die. But they can grow back.
It when you dig holes and you slice one in two, you feel really bad.
Yeah.
So just to keep thinking questions on feeding. So for example, Wagamamas, it's not just plant-based, they just chuck all food waste into those bins.
Yeah, they put, apart from acidic, because worms don't like acidic, to be in acidic environment, so they keep out citrus.
Okay, so no citrus at all?
No, I mean, they can do with a little bit, but it's better just to leave it out. And what else? They don't like garlic, because that's antimicrobial. What else don't they like? They don't like chilies. And no onions.
For Wagamamas.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, because usually it's the pre-prepared food rather than the waste. It's the vegetables that they're sticking in there rather than the cooked food.
Okay, so there's a few things not to feed them, but not much.
Yes,
really.
No, I mean, they will eat hair, cotton. I've composted my jeans. If it's natural, the worms will break it down.
And then in terms of, there's just a couple in terms of the worm cast, so are higher in pH. Do they sort of
neutral
more calcium, or they're just neutral?
It's neutral pH.
Okay, but they won't I suppose if I read the question out, apparently worm casts are high in pH. Can we exploit your worms in some way to improve pasture pH? So can we change?
If it's a diet, obviously, whatever, like with your making compost, if you've got your recipe, if you know what you need, if you need a more fungal dominant compost, you'll feed them more not carbohydrates, carbon. And if you need a more bacterial dominant, you'll feed it green waste and food waste.
And then you mentioned briefly about wormers, as in horse wormers, but what are the impacts of pesticides and fungicides on straw that's used on the?
So
I
haven't always used organic feed, animal waste that's come here. It's not always been organic, and I haven't really had any problem. I'm quite careful with what I put in. I do it in small amounts and see how the worms adapt. But worms can break down pharmaceutical waste, they can break down chemical waste, land that's contaminated with DDTs and PCBs. There's a lot of research out there. It's called vermiremediation, and vermi is Latin for worm. And also there's vermifiltration. That's how we're using worms to clean water as well. So, and there's also vermiponics. I don't advocate for hydroponics, but this is more of a sustainable way if people want to go down that route, to use worm tea instead of using chemicals in a hydroponic system. And that came out of Australia.
And there's a question also quite from early on, which is what's the nutritional or nutrient analysis of worm fertilizer? You mentioned it had all 14 nutrients in it.
Yeah, so I should have got,
if
I can get you an example up actually, 1 minute, because I've got where would I have this? One sec. Should have got this up because I had this for a presentation the other day.
Well, just while you're doing that, Chris Rubbing has just said that his environmental health officer about composting meat waste. She didn't say no, and she said if he could demonstrate how he would do it, she would be fine with it. So,
right,
that's hopeful, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Let's have a look.
I suppose it's also just thinking about where it would be applied, isn't it? That's the only other thing. But I know it shouldn't. It can be tested to check what's bacteria in it, I suppose.
Okay, so if I just share my screen, where are we? I'm not very tech savvy, so share screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this isn't a whole, this is just, I've chopped it off a bit to fit, but you can see this is just a really old sample I had done with it. The waste has just been fed. This is just with kitchen waste. So parts per million, can you see? So calcium is 5,150, average guideline is 1,000 to 2,000. Magnesium 517. The guideline is 60 to 200. So you can really see, I don't know if you can see that it's really on the high scale, but it's not going to leach. It's stable. It's the plants take what they need when they need it. So
it's sort of, it's like, I suppose it's also an element because it's concentrating, isn't it? As you said, it's reducing waste from 90%. Is it 90% reduction in waste?
Yes, up to 90% reduction. Yeah.
So it's just massively concentrating all those nutrients into that product.
Absolutely. Should I want to get rid of my share now? Stop share. There you go. Get us back. So yeah, it's pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff.
I think the general, if we go back a step, because there's a few questions about how to set one up at the beginning, how to set one up.
Yeah.
Particularly, and I suppose the interest is at farm scale.
Yeah.
So there's an example of someone who's producing 100 tons of farmyard manure a year type scale.
Yeah.
But you're in the process of doing one, aren't you?
Yeah. So on Friday, I'm working with an organic dairy farm. So they're diversifying. So we've made a 50 metre by 2.5 metre windrow, and we're going to inoculate that, obviously with cow manure, and we're going to inoculate that with 50 kilos of worms. And then we'll just leave that. And then worms you can harvest, because I believe in low tech. There are these big fancy machines, flow through systems you can buy that cost 30,000, 40,000. And when I was traveling, I I actually saw two of them. There's a company called Vermitech, and they had lights and air vents, and they were like the Ferrari of a worm farm, but they're both broken. So one was at Santa Barbara, no, not Santa Barbara, yeah, Santa Barbara College, and the other one was in South Carolina Medical University, and they're both broken, so they weren't operating, and they'd spent like 30,000-40,000 on these things. So you don't need to do that. You don't need any investment. You just need the worms to, yeah, that would be your investment. So once your windrow is processed, you'll leave that to do its work, and then to separate the worms from the worm manure, you want to lay a fresh windrow next to the processed windrow, leave that for a month or so, and then the worms will migrate to the fresh manure.
So you don't have to add anything. So it's not like you have to keep topping it up with new stuff. The new stuff.
No, if you just stick a windrow, leave it, and let them work through it.
And is this farmyard manure, or is it?
This is farmyard manure. Yeah.
And is it on the earth, or
yes,
is it?
It's on the earth. Yeah.
So why? I know I'm being thick, but why don't they? Do they not go into the soil?
What, the worms?
Yes.
So these are surface dwelling worms. So they're not
okay. So
they thrive in fresh rotting waste.
Okay. So once they're there and they're happy, they won't just.
No. Well, there was a case actually, one case in Minnesota where fishermen were dropping their worms on the floor in a forest. It was near a forest that they weren't using. Yeah, they just discarded them, and then the forest was decimated. So, you know, you have to be careful, but that they were introduced into a place where they shouldn't be. So that was one case where things went wrong. So just thought I'd share that with you.
And there's a couple of questions about, do they need any lime applied, any sort of magic potions applied?
No magic potion. If you can add grit, because worms don't have teeth, so sand or some crushed eggshells, but it's quite a laborious process using crushed eggshells, but that's also obviously a great source of calcium for your vermicompost, and also reduces the acidity. If there's some acidic foods that have ended up in there, you can fix that by sprinkling some eggshells in there. But it just helps them break the waste down, and it also helps prevent something called protein poisoning. So the worms, or we call it a string of pearls, where the worms just look like they all break into sections. It's not very nice to see. So that can overcome that.
And just the worm, it kind of eats away, and then does it just grind things all the way down? Can you just tell us about the insides of a worm?
So yeah, they're just breaking it down. There's actually nematodes in a worm's gut as well, which is breaking down the toxins, and it's just a filtration system. It's just cleaning the waste. So they're just they're very special. And Darwin famously said, worms are more powerful than the African elephant and are more important to the economy than the cow. So,
and just so I know one farmer recently, and he's a livestock farmer, and he just can't find any worms.
Right.
Or very few worms.
On his land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Is he adding
but within the soil?
In the soil. Yeah. So it's exhausted. So he needs to get some microbes on there. Needs to get some microbe tea, inoculate the soil. And that's what we can do with the worm tea as well. So it goes a lot further.
Okay.
And because that's about putting in, like, it's not necessarily dosing them with eggs, is it? But it's putting the right sort of sensor, like worm sensing type molecules into the soil, so the worms know to come. Yeah. And it's a happy place for the worms to move towards.
Exactly. You're creating that foundation in the web, the soil food web.
And as far as,
and also I forgot to tell you, Cleopatra was the first worm worshipper, and anyone who killed or exported an earthworm, it was a crime punishable by death for a fear of offending the god of fertility. I model my hair, my hair do on it.
It's just that it's kind of the history of worms. So, so is there a target carbon nitrogen ratio for worm activities? So is it like you have to what's interesting about cat manure? 30% carbon,
Whereas with hot composting, we're going for 60% carbon. We want less in vermiculture.
Okay. And the one more, can we compost toilet waste?
Yes. So I did a little trial with my own waste indoors. I'm a radical worm farmer. And there was no odor. This was just on a really small bucket. So, and as Oxfam are using tiger worm toilets in refugee camps as well for sanitation. So there is huge opportunity to be using our human waste.
So I know I'm being grim, but just talk us through that. You poo in a bucket. Liz, stop grimacing. Poo in a bucket, and then you put.
I just imagining pooing in a bucket. Sorry, I was thinking. I was there.
And then what do you do with you? Do you put something on it, or
no? I just leave the put the lid on and put it in the cupboard. I only did it for a few weeks, but the quantity, it really reduced the quantity, and it's just good survival techniques as well. Like if the water goes down, it's just good to know that we can do this. Anything can happen.
So
especially for camping, or if you're on the road going on a trip in your vehicle, it's it's just good to know. It's like survival skills. It's like resilient. I was just practicing how resilient I can be.
And so did you put a few worms in the bucket?
Yes, of course. Always. Yes. Yeah. They didn't come out the sink. So yes, I did start off with some worms.
Oh, this was
and worms will they will culture, so worms will culture any organic material, but it's better when they're so I had to, with my own human waste, actually put some worm eggs in there. So when they're born, they adapt to that environment very easily. So if I was just feeding worms on a diet of avocados and potato peels, because they do love potato peels because they love starch, it's a really good worm fattener. So there's loads of opportunities for chip industry, potato industry. Where was I? So yeah, if they were then to be put in dog waste when they've had a nice diet, it's going to be a bit of a shock. So it's going to take a while. So it's the next generation. When they're born in that substrate, they will culture that very easily. So,
and the other, I suppose, because of the one I've set a very basic one up at home, and I'm putting in the veg from my the potato peelings and all that stuff. But then you realise it's in quite big chunks. And then I read something that I have to freeze it so it makes it more available. Is that just
right? Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of energy, isn't it? We don't want to be using electricity. The idea is that we like reducing things. But yes, people do say to put it in the freezer, because then when it does defrost, there's more microbes. So worms are actually eating the microorganisms. They're not eating the waste. So they're eating the microbes that are breaking the waste down. So with food waste, the more surface area you can create, the more surface area for the microbes to attach themselves to, and the easier it is for the worms with their little mouths. Well, it's actually a muscle, but if you want to go to that much energy.
So it's a bit like, I suppose, if we think about it from a ruminant perspective, they chew and chew and chew to make it as small as possible to give more surface area for the microbes to get in. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for those microbes to get going.
Help them out.
Okay. And then a couple more questions. So Sarah, she was on the same course as Nick and I, and she set up a one in an old water tank, 250 litres of bedding went into it. And she's been feeding it with small amounts of chopped veg. Yeah. She's got wool around it, which has eggs in it. She wants to move some of them to an insulated builder's bags of aged straw and muck with a bit of hen manure in. Keep multiplying them up. Yeah, that sounds good. As long as it's moist, we want to maintain really like a 70% moisture. So the main thing is making sure that it's moist enough. And I suppose her actual, sorry, I missed the actual question, which is how do you separate out the worms? So you were saying like moving them, or does she just take so you can do it in a few different ways. So you can charm them with light, moisture, or food.
So if you've got, say, if you're doing it on a big tank, oh, I've got this on presentation to show you actually, but it's on a different one. But I can send you some stuff. So what I do, for example, in the 1,000-litre wheelie bins that I have at the military and the shopping centre, I tell them to stop feeding the worms for a few weeks. And then I put some fresh waste in those plastic veg trays. Do you know what I mean? Shallow, with holes in them. So then the worms then will migrate up to the fresh waste, and then you can remove them. And then you keep doing that until you've charmed them all. So you can do it that way, or if you want to, well, on a small scale, what you can do is make little mounds. This is quite laborious, but the worms don't like the light, so they will travel into the middle. You tap off the castings, and they'll move in, wait another 5 minutes, tap it off. So yeah, that's a really laborious process, but on a small scale, that's fine. But on a large scale, it's better to charm them with food, or if you lay it out on a mat, the processed worm compost at about 1 inch. And then if you keep the middle very damp, like with a damp piece of cardboard or a piece of fabric, as the worm castings dry out, the worms will head to the moist part. So there's that as well. And actually saw something really interesting. I think it was on a YouTube in the Philippines, I think, to in the dry season, what they do is they dig like a meter square hole, and then they just keep that area moist, so they don't have to water one part, and then that keeps the worms alive. Little tip.
And then so basically it's just trying to, they basically don't like light, and they like moisture, and they love cardboard. So it's trying, using any of those techniques just to try and lure them in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
John's asking, so once you've set that windrow up, there's no need to turn it, so you don't need a fancy turner.
You don't need to do anything. So that's the great thing about vermiculture, is there's no labor in, there's no physical, well, there is when you're processing, but you don't need to turn, you don't need to do anything. The worms are doing that for you.
Okay. And how long once you remove the worms, so you've got them into your tray or under your cardboard, how long does that product last? Does it go off?
The vermicompost.
Yeah.
So about a year. Well, it started. I mean, it'll last forever if you keep it moist, but it's going to reduce the microorganisms over time. So you want to use it fresh, and it's the only manure you can use straight out of the animal. Fresh, you can use fresh worm manure.
And there's also a question: if you do choose to make a tea from it, what's the process about making a tea? So
you want 500 milliliters to the perfect is, I think it's not gallons. I'm working in gallons because I'm doing the soil food web. 90 liters to 500 milliliters, and you want an 80 to 100 psi pump. Oxygenate that.
Okay.
You want to make sure that you're cleaning your brewing tank as well, so he's not getting any bad microbes in there. And always dechlorinate the water. You can dechlorinate water by putting a drop of humic acid in the water, and you can get the humic acid from the worm casting. So if you filter some clean water through worm castings, you'll get humic acid, and then you want to put a few drops of that into your water, or leave the water to dechlorinate for 24 hours. But that's really important to make sure that the water's dechlorinated. Also, I don't know if anyone knows about EM1, Effective Microorganisms 1. I use that in my worm farms a lot. So it was discovered by a guy called Teru Higa in Japan. I was fortunate, I had some funding to go to Thailand, to go to the Nature Farming Centre, to go on a workshop. And it's used in agriculture, in the building industry, cleaning industry. Basically, it cleans water. It's a fertilizer. It's really interesting stuff. And the book is called An Earth-Saving Revolution. And the website is called EMRO, Effective Microorganisms Research Organisation. And there's loads of examples on there. So I can send you some stuff, Liz, if you want to send people.
Please do, yeah.
I've written a report about that and how to make fertilizer out of that as well. So spraying that on your worm farm helps keep it healthy. So EM1 is a collection of 3 different microbes. It's phototropic bacteria, which consumes carbon dioxide, methane and hydrogen sulfide, and it excretes nitrogen, oxygen and water. And then there's lactic acid bacteria, which is an antioxidant and stops the decaying process. And then there's yeast. The yeast synthesizes all the microbes. So it's really, really good stuff. I highly recommend it.
And so that's you'd be using that on some of your corporate worm farms as well.
Yeah, so I just in case somebody's put some food in there, or if it started to go anaerobic, it just gets rid of that smell instantly. And this can be used, and as we've got an industrial chicken farm down the road and it absolutely stinks, it's just disgusting. If they were using it, it wouldn't be that bad. So, but I don't really want to, don't need to go there.
So just thinking about those intensive systems, could they, because I watched, I don't know if you saw Paul, is it Paul Whitehouse last night with the river program?
No.
Well, it's all about the River Wye and pollution.
Oh
stuff.
yes, from the chicken. Yes, yeah.
So could something happen at that scale?
Yeah, any scale.
And why doesn't it happen?
I just think there's just a hugely underdeveloped in this country. And the guy that actually started talking about worm farms, his name Edwards. What's his name? I think his surname was Edwards, in the 80s, but he went to America. So yeah, everything's just been happening in the US. And people think that the US are really behind, but actually they're really progressive. Particularly in agriculture, I've seen some really inspiring projects. I mean, in prison, I visited a prison in Seattle, and they're worm composting all of their waste in the prison, and then they're supplying the local county council with organic fertilizer. So the council is saving money, the community aren't being sprayed, and the inmates have been given meaningful activity. And actually before COVID, I had a contract to work with 3 prisons. We were going to deliver a horticultural program, train the inmates how to farm worms. Then we were going to supply local farms, but that was EU funding, and that got pulled. So that could have been a real blueprint, because I'm really interested in, so worms are very practical, but there's a spiritual lesson. They teach us about forgiveness and rebirth, because they clean toxic waste, and we can just, each day we can move on and be better. And there's a nice spiritual message with the worms as well. So yeah, it's so if that so to go back to the chickens, if the chicken muck went through worms, and then how that wouldn't be then it would be clean, it would be a stable product. Why aren't we doing it? I know it's I mean, I'm not from a farming background at all. It's taken me a while to get where I am, and for even people to listen to me, coming from the city. Well, I grew up in the country, but I spent most of my early 20s in cities. So yeah, it's it's very underdeveloped. It's really bizarre. I mean, I was talking about the Philippines. In the Philippines, the government of the Philippines train farmers how to farm worms, and then they buy the worm manure off them, and then they give it them back for free. This is like, a developing country. They're very progressive in some ways. And there's definitely, it's big business. We have to remember that it's big business, and they're not going to let anyone get in the way of that. So we just need to do it ourselves. I'm not relying on, I think that's why, I started the Urban Worm. You give up and you don't have much faith in governments to support us to do these things. So we have to spread the message, and we have to do it ourselves. But you don't need any big fancy equipment. You just need worms. So if you've got the space, and in America, they've obviously got a lot of space. They've got a lot of land to do it on as well. So That's definitely this big business in America. I met a millionaire worm farmer. It's called the Worm Farm in California, and he was on Blue Collar Millionaire, and he's doing so well that he can't advertise. And within a 50-mile radius, there's 11 worm farmers. So there's enough, there's enough for everyone. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities for people, especially with the peat. We can't be using peat. Yeah. There's a huge opportunity, and as well, we can inoculate. If you've got spent compost, you only need to add 10-20% of vermicompost, and you're going to inoculate it and bring it to life. So a little goes a very long way.
So potentially so the spent compost has already gone through the system, so however it's been used, but it can be basically
it can be re-inoculated. It's re-inoculated. So if you make a compost tea, if you inoculate and spray that on your compost pile, you're going to bring it to life. So
just a quick question, quick follow on from the tea. Can you use rainwater? Is that,
yes,
do they like rainwater better?
Yes, ideally, if you can.
Okay. And could you use a compost tea on pasture land?
Yes, of
on
course.
Grassland?
Yes.
So and that's how you get, I suppose it's inoculation. So we
yes.
said it's that sort of quorum sensing type stuff.
Yeah.
There's a bit more about windrows.
Yeah.
When the question about your windrow trial, the one you're setting up, how much volume is it likely to drop? Like, it's going to be a big part of?
So we've built it up. It's a meter high. You don't want it to get higher than a meter, because in case it starts hot composting. So we don't want to cook the worms. The worms ideally like to be between 10 and 30 degrees. So it will reduce in volume, probably more than 50%.
Okay, and then
we just don't want them to cook.
And there's another question, which is this. So that's the key, isn't it? So it's got to be a thin layer rather than a standard muck heap, which is this massive pile.
Yeah.
It'll just get too hot.
It'll get too hot in the middle. I mean, you will find surface dwelling worms on the outside of your compost heap, but they'll be migrating to the cooler parts. But if you can harvest them from there, you can pinch some worms, because they're 28-30 pound a kilo. So you can scavenge them.
Can they be done can it be done in a shed? Does it have to be outside?
Yeah, no, it can be done indoors, outdoors, obviously in the cold weather. My worms survived a lot better in the cold than they did the heat. They clump together in a little ball to keep warm.
Okay. So in terms of Sarah's example of having like a wool around it, so they do need some insulation in cold times. I did use
I mean, they will slow down if they can have a warmer part of the compost, that they will just migrate to the warmest part. So if you can, I mean, I do sometimes put hot water bottles in my wheelie bins. I mean, yeah.
Wow. There's someone on the call this evening who was using a heated blanket for his wormery.
So. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. They need the support. So we need to get them through the winter. But yeah, the heat, they just crawled out to their death. I lost a lot. A lot of commercial growers did, that I was speaking to. So it was really tough on the worms.
And I think we answered this, but there's another one, which is, what's the best way to separate worms from cast if you're harvesting large quantities?
So the best thing to do is to put, so if you're doing on windrows, big giant windrows, is to put fresh waste and put a fresh windrow next to that, and just wait for them to migrate. Make sure that windrow is kept moist. And if you can put some cardboard in there as well, some damp cardboard, they love that. So that's the easiest thing to do. I mean, there are these flow through systems, mechanized machines, like in upstate New York, in Rochester. I mean, it's freezing up there, and all these units were all heated. I really don't know why they were doing it up there, because it was funded by the government. Actually, I think they got 4 million for worm power in upstate New York. And there's a cutting bar underneath, and they've got big machines that are spreading fresh waste, and then it's just automated. But that's like a lot of investment. So I just advocate for low tech. We don't need to spend a lot of money. We can just start tomorrow if you've got some worms and some space. So windrows.
And how long, I guess it depends, but how long does it take them to migrate?
So it depends how hungry they are. But really, to get them all out, you want to leave it a month, just to be sure. There will be eggs in there, so you will lose some eggs. But yeah, you can't get obsessed about rescuing all the eggs. But that's the best thing to do.
I suppose it's learning patience, isn't it? It's that idea.
Yeah.
It's easy to spread it out of a shed.
Or what you can do as well, so what they were doing in Cuba. So I should have got, let me see if I can get you some video. Let me show you this. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen again. I'll just show you these windrows. Share screen.
Liz, this is a different world, isn't it? It's quite exciting.
So this one to the top left is upstate, that's Worm Power in upstate New York. So these are all, you can see the castings underneath, and this is all automated that put a layer of vermicompost, and they're processing the waste. I think it's like 80,000 cows. There's a dairy farm down the road. So they're working together, and hence why they've got the government funding. And this one on the right, this is Vermigrand in Austria. I had some funding to go there as well. And so on the bottom left, so this is in Cuba. You don't really need these windrow, the bricks. But what they do with this system, they were putting netting on the top, and then fresh manure on top of the net. And then they were waiting a week, and then they lifted off the net. So the worms will be with the fresh manure. So it really depends on what scale you're doing it. And the one on the bottom right, that is in the Philippines. So yeah, different examples of, let me see if I can find. So this here, this is Mark Purser, from Worm Power, the millionaire worm farmer, but 99% of his customers come from the medical marijuana industry. So obviously it's legalized, medical marijuana is legalized in California, but here this is, and he's got no investment here. This is on his farm, and he keeps a hose going through it just to keep it moist, but he's just farming on windrows like that. Really simple, you know. Really basic stuff. This is in the Philippines. The goats on the right are raised above this system on the left, and the poo is just dropping down into those beds. So there's that system. What have I got? Oh, and this is mine. This is at my worm farm in Colston. So I was just using breeze blocks and filling these, and then removing and putting fresh waste in one section, and then removing in the breeze block so the worms would migrate. And this has got some lovely vermicompost.
Mine's going to be breeze block based. Yeah, I've decided.
Yeah. So you know, really easy. What's this one? I think that's it on these ones. I haven't got much exciting stuff here. Oh, and this is just in the prison. If someone's interested, there's a really good TED talk from Nick that's in the prison called The Power of Sustainability. And that's from, that's come from the prison. So, and this is inside, and it's in Cuba, in a 24-meter squared rabbit farm that was attached to the house. I mean, it was pretty grim, but survival. And there was worm beds underneath the rabbits. So the rabbits are just pooing into the worm bed. And it didn't smell, it was very hygienic. So they wouldn't be able to farm in this way without the worms. It would stink.
And that's a question's been, could the systems you saw is that the animals were on sort of on grills, weren't they, above the worm farm? So they
Yeah.
can't. If you introduce worms into a cattle yard, I
Yeah,
suppose it would just get too hot.
they'll probably get trampled.
Okay.
So worms are very strong. They can move. I've read, you've read so many different things on vermiculture, but I've read 9 times their body weight. But the other week I read they can move 50 times their body weight. So they're pretty strong as well.
So how do you test how strong a worm is? I suppose attach it to a weight.
I don't know. I didn't do it myself. But yeah, let me stop share. But that's yeah. Lots of opportunities. As you can see, it's really, it's really low tech. Really low tech.
So at the moment, if you wanted to buy some vermicast, where'd you go and how much is it and how available?
So I was supplying RHS, but it was too much for me. It's not worth it doing it wholesale for me, but it was just nice to get the credibility of RHS wanting your product. But I sell for 500 millilitres, it's £8. And it ranges from, I've seen it being sold for £25 for 500 millilitres. So it's, it varies, but it's very high value product. So if you can make it yourself, and this is the thing, the farmers that I speak to, apart from the medic, it seems to be that the only farmers that can actually afford to buy this are marijuana, people that grow marijuana and vineyards and high value crops. I was in Holland, I was in Amsterdam in November, visiting the guy that runs Worm Hotels, and they're just amazing. I wonder if I can show, if I got them to show you. So in Holland, let's have a look, 1 minute. In Holland, the government has funded, there's 2,000 worm farms, urban worm farms in Holland, and there's over 500, about 500 in Amsterdam. Let's see if I can find it. Too many things. Where is it? Here. And these are amazing. I'm just going to show you these worm farms in Holland. Okay, let me share my screen again. Sorry, guys. Share screen. Okay. Can you see? Have you got my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay, so sorry, it's just a training course I was delivering. Oh yeah, in a zoo as well. They're doing it in Seattle. Zoo in Seattle, and they're selling that product as well, which is creating another income for the farm. So this is the vermitech systems that are broken that I was telling you about. Rubbish. Oh, even in a prison in the Philippines, they're doing it as well. You can see really basic, really weird prison. If anyone wants to see something really strange, Google the name of this prison, and they dance. It's like a tourist attraction, and they do dances for you. It's really strange experience. But anyway, where was I? These here. So this is really cool. So there's an architect. I'll try and move this out of the way. And this is an old cable reel that's been converted into a worm farm, and these are on the street. So anyone can apply for a worm farm. You need 5 signatories from your neighbourhood, and then the government will pay. And these are €5,000 each. This is one that's a planter, and this one is made out of something called eco board. So yeah, it's really cool. So it's all going on, but yeah, obviously there's a lot going on in the Netherlands at the moment, and obviously the farmers are protesting, and it's yeah, they need support. So yeah, they've got all they're supporting communities with their worm farms. Maybe they should need more farmers need support, but that's another thing.
So back to my wormery for a moment. So I think I've got I need more drainage. So in that so like the planter in the middle, would they have a
Yes.
platform within it to keep
Yeah.
the worms away from the moisture?
Yes, the bottom. And the one in this cable reel on the left, there's like a plug that they had, like that you remove, and then people like siphon out the juice at the bottom. But yeah, drainage is really important. And as you were saying, that Nicole Master was saying, you don't really want to have lots of fluid, like it's but you do need to drain them off just in case. So you want to be using, people think it's all about the worm which it's actually leachate, but it's the worm, we want to be making worm tea, because leachate, worm can have bad bacteria in it, and then we don't want to be using that on any scale in case we're creating disease.
Okay, so what I'm collecting out the bottom of my wormery, I don't want to use.
You don't, well, I mean, it's not bad stuff, and I use it on my house plants, and my mum swears by it, but I feel more comfortable brewing a tea. And when I do look at under my microscope the leachate, it has, it's full of ciliates, which is it shows that it's a long day. It shows that it's gone anaerobic when you've got too many ciliates. So worm tea is the best way. But this is a worm bag that I bought from India. I mean, the postage cost me more than the actual worm bag, but they're worm farming in these. This was like $20 or something. So, and I had just filled that with cow manure, but then the cows broken and trampled all over it, so that wasn't very successful. But you can
it's just
buy
like
these.
A builder's bag.
It's just like a builder's bag, a shallow builder's bag. So yeah, you can do it in a builder's bag as long as there's drainage. I've got anything else to show you. So this is at MacArthur Glen. These are my wheelie bins. What have we got here? Military. So yeah, it's community composting. Had some funding a few years back to set up a community composting project in partnership with a mosque and a Steiner school, and also at a social eating project as well. Yeah, social eating project. And I had some funding for a project called 1000 Worm Farmers. And it was supposed to finish in July 2023, but I've met my target now, and we now have lots of, only small scale. I sent out 1,000 packs of 100 grams of worms to anyone who made a DIY worm farm. So they just sent me their pictures of their homemade worm farms. The only rule was that it had to be homemade. We weren't accepting any bought worm farms, and that was really successful. So it's it's happening. There's a wave, but yeah, it's just taken some time.
There's a few more questions about the windrows again.
Yeah.
So the example that you're just starting, how long do you think it will take to make
the vermicompost?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it should be processed. It's just the weather depending. I don't know what the weather's going to do. So if it stays cold like this, it's going to take a lot longer. But it should be done in 4 to 5 months. We'll have a good product.
Okay, and then so after 5 months, you'll then introduce some fresh stuff near it, and then you'll see how it's going. Okay. Yeah. And will that, because I suppose it's outside, it won't need watering, but if it got dry.
If it got dry, you'll just have to give it a hose down. That's it. We don't, if your worm farm dries out, as well as, and so thinking about microorganisms, microbes swim, they don't walk. So if your compost pile or your worm farm has dried out, then everything's going to go into cysts. So the microbes are going to go into cyst form, and the worms are going to die or migrate and find somewhere else to live. So we've got anything else to show you? Oh, I had the council, Nottingham, Newark and Sherwood Council brought me 50 wheelie bins to adapt, and now we've got 40, and now 40 schools have got wheelie bin worm farms in Newark and Sherwood.
And there's a question about the flap. It looks a bit like a cat flap, but is that
so this? Yes. So this, the worms, you fill up the waste slowly. You don't add loads at once because that will create anaerobic conditions. So the worms will slowly move their way up. And then when it's full, you will lift the hatch up and you empty the worm castings. And in theory, the worms will be at the top with the fresh waste. So they're moving their way up.
So it's just a way of getting the processed stuff out.
Yeah.
Of it. And then
Yeah, it's just like with a composting hatch, it's just a way to remove. And obviously the tap is to drain off the wormery or to use it on the garden. So really low tech. And the councils have so many of these that they just shred. These were all seconds that were heading for the bin, and they're expensive to buy new. I think they're about 50 quid for a new wheelie bin. So yeah, it's good. Also, that's my 1000 worm farmers. Got anything else to show you? My Winston. I really encourage people to apply for a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship as well, if nobody knew about that. So they've been really good to me. They support it's up to 8 weeks fully funded research in any field, from therapy to art to architecture. If you're passionate and committed and you want to bring that information and knowledge back to the UK, they will support you. So I'm very grateful to the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. It changed my life.
Oh, it's do you mean it's the range of people that get money, isn't it, as well? So
yeah,
it's a lot wider. So we would associate like the Nuffield. It's the same principle of the Nuffield Farming Scholarship, but with such a wider range of topics.
And actually a really underrepresented, Sam was on the panel before COVID, and is really underrepresented in farming. So please consider applying.
We've still got some questions about windrows. You'll be glad to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Will they attract rats?
No. So obviously you don't want to be making a windrow with food waste. You only want to be applying the windrow method with manure, because it's the pheromones, it's the hydrogen sulfide and all the when things go anaerobic that attract pests. But that's not going to happen if you've got a shallow windrow.
Okay.
So yeah, only use animal waste for windrows. If you're going to use on a scale, if you're doing food waste, like with my wheelie bins, it's an enclosed system, so the rats can't get in. I don't know if I've got any other examples of windrows to show you. There's just another windrow here, and they're just processing this by hand. They're taking the worms out by hand with the system. And this is Michael Kagas. He's a really excellent vermiculture consultant in the Philippines. And he actually runs it's like a social enterprise. So he trains women and elderly people how to farm worms, and then he buys them off. Then he buys them off them. So they queue up with their kilos, weigh them up, and then he goes and takes a ton of worms to a farm, whatever. So it's a really nice, he's running an unofficial social enterprise. So that was really, I've got any more windrows to show you. So there's that windrow. Worms, no. So, no more windrows.
So I've learned I should be running an enclosed wormery because I'm using food waste.
Yeah.
I'm only meant to be using my breeze blocks when it's just animal. So manure.
Yeah.
Fine.
I mean, it's just safer. You don't want any visitors. So yeah, if you're using just food waste, keep an enclosed unit.
And I think mine's too high.
Right, too deep. Yeah.
Someone's asked for a book for a very basic vermiculture beginners.
So the Worm Farmer's Handbook by Rhonda Sherman And my research is in there from my trip to Cuba. Rhonda's great. So she is the worm queen of America. So she hosts the International Vermiculture Conference. It's usually in North Carolina, but it's now this year it's in Florence, Italy, on the 8th and 9th of November. And I'll be speaking if anyone's interested in having a little holiday.
And are you the worm queen? Sorry, God.
I'm the princess.
Say her surname again. Sorry, I missed her surname.
Rhonda Sherman. And she'll be coming to the UK. So she's going to be staying with me after. She'll be traveling back to the UK with me. So I'm going to take her on a little tour of worm farms in the UK. So if you've got one set up, I can bring her to come and see you.
No pressure from the queen of worm farms.
No pressure. But that's a really good book and a really beautiful book. My favorite book is called The Earth Moved by Amy Stewart, which is a nicer read. Rhonda Sherman's book is very practical. Very practical.
So quick fire questions.
Yeah.
If it rains outside, I'm guessing the rain just passes through the heap into the soil. Easy. Is it easier? Is it better if the caca manure is pre-rotted, or I'm guessing there's a risk of it being anaerobic? Or if you can leave it for a month or so, but I mean it's fine. You can use. I have used fresh manure. The only issue with using fresh manure, if you're doing it on a meter or over a meter, it can obviously heat up. So, but yeah, you can use fresh manure. Okay. And do you breed your own worms, or are you buying them in?
So I've got my own for my own use, but when I'm doing big commercial jobs, I buy them in. And there's opportunity for people to grow commercially because it's growing, and my worm farm, I can't always meet demands, especially if farmers are going to be taking this up on scale. There's going to be a gap. But actually the Netherlands are I think they're the largest exporters of worms in the world as well. So a lot of our worms come from the Netherlands.
And you mentioned someone just asked in terms of sort of how much, what's the ratio of worms you need to start? So you're
right. So for ultimate waste management, they say that you want a kilo of worms per square foot. That's when you've got a flow through system going on with the cutting bars. But you don't need to have it that intense. You don't need to be doing it that intensely. But for a wheelie bin, for example, for a 240 litre wheelie bin, I recommend to start with 500 grams or a kilo to a kilo.
Okay.
And just sorry, go on, Liz.
No, just so for 1,000 litres, that would be basically anywhere between 2 and 4 kilos of worms.
Yeah, so I put 4 kilos in the 1,000 litre bins at the military and shopping centres.
So if someone's watching this, where do they just Google worms?
What if they want to buy worms, or yeah. So composting worms, tiger worms. So you want to Google composting worms or tiger worms. Yorkshire worms is a really good place to get your worms. We use Stuart at Yorkshire worms. And if you're looking for research, Google vermiculture research papers, and there'll be a lot of. I think I've got some on here actually. 1 minute. This is an example just showing with the plastic tray I was telling you about. So if you're doing it on a table, put a tray with some fresh waste in, and the worms will just migrate to the tray. So you can do that on any scale. This is my workshop. tea, worm tea. What was I looking for to show you? Oh, worms mating. Yeah, if you ever find they like tie themselves in a knot, it's quite disturbing, but that's what's happening there. Composting, EM, that's telling you about the EM1, which is bokashi. It's the same way to make bokashi. Yeah, here. So yeah, some loads of research. This is just a few I've picked out. But yeah, the managed waste from the pharmaceutical industry, sewerage sludge, what's this? Contaminated oil. So, you know, it's the possibilities are really endless. Yeah, and they produce and I don't know how to pronounce this, metallathonin, which wraps around heavy metals. So they're really special.
So there's just a few more questions in a particularly random order. Is there a risk of when we're buying in worms, of buying in a non-native that's going to cause chaos? For example, jumping worms.
If you're buying them, so what if you're buying worms in?
Is there a risk of buying in something we shouldn't and causing?
No, I mean tigers. I mean, if you're buying them online from this country, I mean, and usually in America we use the same worms as well, and in Europe. So you're going to be okay.
Okay. There's a quick one about dog poo bags. So the biodegradable ones, they're not necessarily. Can worms deal with them?
No, well, they need heat. These compostable bags, they take a long time, and I've had them in my worm farms for years and years and years. They never seem to break down. Even the microbes don't break them down. So no, we don't really want to be putting that in the dog waste bin. Okay. So this is the problem if we want to do this on scale. Obviously, how do you, if they're out in the community, how do we get the dog waste in the dog poo bins? But if you've got one in your garden, we have one for our dog. So yeah, keeping it local. And it's the poor people that have to clean these bins out as well, dealing with everyone's dog waste. It's a horrible job. That's one job that a robot should be doing.
And you've talked about the opportunity of breeding worms as a question of how to. So is it if would Rhonda's book go on to that as well? Is it?
I can't remember if she's got. I don't think she has about breeding in that. But there is an elite. It's called elite. What's it, elite worm breeding? There's a course you can buy online. So I do breed on a small scale. So I have a breeding room and I keep it heated when it gets really cold. And I do it in shallow grey trays. So it's a different process. It's quite laborious. I don't really enjoy it. I just like to let them get on with it. But you want to, it's a concentrated process, and you want them feeding on the top. So, and starchy food, if you want to breed, give them potato peelings and molasses. They love a bit of molasses as well. But yeah, they like starch.
Any potato or crisp people on the call, that would just make sense. You could do like Tyrrells, don't they? They do vodka. Do they do vodka or something? They could do vodka, worms, and crisps.
Yeah.
It's it's not Tyrrells.
It is, isn't it? Isn't it?
I don't remember. Chase vodka.
Chase.
It might be Tyrrells.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and they like
questions.
This is sorry. I'm going to stop asking random questions shortly, but can you just run me through how to make tea again? So I'm basically taking out the product they've produced and I'm brewing it into water that has been
so what you want to do, if you want a brew bag, ideally, you don't have to, but it needs to be 400 micro meters. You can use like the fish pond net, because that's enough for the fungal hyphae to get through. So you want to put it in the bag, put it in your water, let it brew. Have I got anything on? Let me see if I've got something here on composting.
And you mentioned it was that's 500 mil.
Here we go. So yeah, sorry, it's 20 litres per acre. This is what there. So this is just on a small, obviously on a really small scale. So I've just got using a muslin bag here, and that's just a fish tank. But you want to be using your fish pump, not your fish pump, your aerating pump, 80 to 100 psi.
Okay, so it needs that during that brewing of 2 to 48 hours. It basically needs constant
oxygen. Yeah,
and
then the microbes are reproducing, doubling their population.
And that 20 litres, once it's there, is enough to spread on an acre.
It's enough there.
It's probably worth, depending on the spray, it might need more moist water to get it onto.
Yeah.
Okay. So it can be diluted again.
Yeah, but it's pretty good. 500. So if you think that's a litre of waste, you're turning it into a really high value product. It's like it's a no-brainer. Gold. Well, farmers call it black gold. So, I was saying it's very expensive for farmers to actually buy it themselves, but if you can be producing it for yourself on farm, that's the way forward.
It looks like we've got an actual worm farmer on the call. Tom.
Great.
And he's maybe one for you to visit, Anna.
Yes, that would be amazing. Brilliant. So, yes. Do share the contact. That would be great.
Yeah, and so someone's asked, what's the best way to get in touch with you? You're going to have a lot of fans after this.
Okay, so the best way to get, I'm not on, I've come off social media. So my email is anna@theurbanworm.co.uk. And you can also sign up to New Worm Order News, because I have a newsletter now. Yeah, I've come off social media because it's not good for anyone. I don't want to add any fire to that.
Fire. Liz, what are we going to do with all these questions?
I'm ignoring them. Decided that's the best way. Because some of it is now, we're moving more into, some of it's bokashi related and some of it's now compost tea related. So I think some of it's a separate conversation, isn't it?
Right.
And some people are just talking through in terms of what they've been up to in their plan. And someone's terrified of worms. So I thought we could move on from some of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, if anyone wants to send me an email and ask any questions, it might take me a few weeks to answer them, but I will try my best to get back to you.
What I will do is I'll put your email in the chat.
And I can send my Winston report if anyone's interested as well from my research trip. And EM, I can, or I'll send that to you, Liz, and you can distribute that.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing this.
Oh, the other thing to say is that you're coming to I'm going to have to go and improve my wormery tomorrow. But we're planning an event, a wormery or how to build a worm farm event at my farm on the 17th of May. I'm near Stamford in South Lincolnshire. So there'll be a session aimed at gardeners and a session aimed at farmers. So more information will be available on that shortly. So that's quite exciting. Nick, what have you learned from this evening?
Well, I was just going to ask Anna quickly. So you mentioned the Schumacher College. That's the one down south, is it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's linked to Dartington, isn't it? And I just wondered, with your travels around the world, what state do you think this country is in relation to this type of way of thinking, and how where are we on the scale of
like America's like 10 and we're what 2.5, 3, I'd say.
And what would your
in terms of waste management, like it's understood as a method for managing waste and utilizing agriculture, and here this is so it's it's afforded me a career. It's niche, it's like quirky, but it's really not, you know, it's feels very apocalyptic to be talking about this and sharing this information when, you know, this has always been here. It's just harnessing what is there and really working with nature. So but yeah, we've got a long way to go, but we're getting there. I mean, we've got the military on board, and they're looking at scaling this up throughout the whole country, which if they do, I don't know what I'll do, because I'm not really prepared for that. That wasn't the idea of what I want to do. But yeah, it's slowly, but yeah, there is obviously a lot of greenwashing. You were saying earlier, people are jumping on this, but if there's soil being made at the end of the day, you know, that's okay.
Because earlier we just briefly mentioned hydroponics, and I just think this is such a good path to be on, and there's so much potential. And yeah, it's just trying to make it more, well, mainstream, I suppose, and normal, how it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. It just needs to be normal. And even in Australia, it's huge. It's it's very normal. It seems to be very normal everywhere else, but here. But yeah, I'm trying my best.
But no, well, thank you very much. It's been amazing. Loved it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice.
You may be back. You never know.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll be happy to come back.
If you're free in September, Carbon Calling. Oh, we'd love to have you.
Yes, well, yeah, absolutely. When's that? 6th and 7th?
Yeah. No, 6th and 7th, or 9th and 10th in Cumbria.
Right. 9th, 10th.
Oh, yes, that would be amazing. Ooh.
I can do that. I think I think I can probably do that.
So you could we could do a workshop. Oh.
We could do a workshop.
And so yeah, so next call, me and Nick will have photos of our new improved wormeries, 2 versions, enclosed versus windrows, won't we, Nick? We're going to make this normal. I'm not sure we're the people to do it, but we'll try.
Brilliant.
Well, we can just
farming normal again.
Yeah.
But I'm not pooing it in a bucket. I'm just telling you that right now. Not doing it.
You never know. Anyway, we don't know what's around the corner. It's better to be prepared. True. It's just better to know that you can.
I shall. Oh no, I won't practice that skill yet, but I accept I might need it. On this note, I've taken it into a very bad place. I apologise, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, we're going to be better worm farmers from this point onwards. So thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks everybody for all your questions. And a recording will be available hopefully tomorrow on YouTube. So thanks a lot, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye-bye.